Greetings, I'm Mark and welcome to our 8th devlog, where we introduce the line of sight logic for our stealth system, we add new elements of decoration to our scenario, and finally, after many months of work, I will show you how we got nice quality trees. All of this coming up next. To begin with, I want to confess that no, this week we did not finish all the objectives we set to ourselves. I expected for this video to have completely finished the stealth system, but these days we had many distractions, some family activities, during the week we spent a few days without internet. In short, I could not concentrate enough on the code to get it done. But the good thing is that among the many distractions, I took the opportunity to solve pending tasks that we've been dragging for some time. I added some of the rocks that I didn't like because they were too pointy. We added flat walls to the scene for climbable shortcuts to make these routes more obvious and to allow our code to work properly. Several other minor adjustments like working on the terrain and making our barn functional. And finally, we remade the foliage of 6 of our trees, 18 in total if we count all the levels of detail, but compared to our previous trees that really hurt my eyes, our new trees are quite nice and satisfying, so I'll no longer be ashamed to show them in our videos. I will add a time-lapse of the process in case you want to know how we got these results, although after so much suffering with these models, probably the simplest thing will be to buy a package of 3D trees. Link to our store in the description of the video. But it's really not so complicated, just a little time consuming. It works this way. Once you get the pattern of our particles, and we need to do a version for each level of detail, I found that these patterns work quite well for us. Then we need to use vertex groups to designate location of our particles in the section of the branches of our preference. For rotation in the advanced setting, we use Set Global Axis for the branches to face up, activate the original rotation of our particles, and raise the random phase to the max to get enough variation in the rotation of the leaves. And for the size variation, 0.65 on the random scale work well with most of our trees. Either way, just play around to see what looks best. Now we need to find the seed that best approximates the desired result, but sometimes it may be necessary to go back to edit the vertex group and add more vertices to the branches that do not receive particles. We can also play with the options of random order and even distribution, which never give me the expected results, and the truth is that I don't quite understand how they work, but they can help from time to time. It is worth investing some time in this step, since the closer we get to the desired result at this time, the less manual adjustments we'll have to make later. And that's also the most tedious part of this process. When we are satisfied, we'll make 3 additional copies of this tree with its particle system, and we save the original. It is always essential to have a backup. And now we can convert the particles of these copies into real instances, each with one of our 3 different particle patterns, in order to get our 3 levels of detail. Each of mine reduces the polygons by a factor of half of the previous one, but you can simplify it more if you wish between levels of detail. And now, with all the meshes separate from our particles, I like to add them all to a new object like this cube, to erase from the particles all links and unnecessary information they can bring along. And now, with this tree canopy being a separate object, comes the most tedious task, and the reason why I postponed so much remaking these trees. And that's the task of removing unnecessary particles from the most saturated areas, and bringing them to the bare branches that were not covered by the particle modifier. This is the part that requires the most time, but makes a world of difference in the final result of our tree. And it is also a very good quality check to make sure that we have not exceeded our amount of particles. Ideally, we want just the amount of particles necessary to cover all the branches. This means finding only a few lumps pile up. The idea is that it should be difficult to find overlapping particles in each branch. If you find too many saturated bundles, your tree will end up having too many useless polygons that represent an unnecessary expense of performance in your game. That is why it is important to keep a backup of your particle system. In this case, I had to erase the first canopies and return to lower the particles considerably, but having the right particle amount also reduces the manual labor. When satisfied with the number of particles, now it's time to make our adjustments. And my recommendation is that to move the particles, edit the meshes of all the levels of detail at the same time, by selecting each one before entering edit mode. In addition to saving time, we also make sure that the position of all the particles is the same in each level of detail, to make the transitions between each of them a lot less perceptible. This requires some expertise and a lot of patience to be able to identify and grab the corresponding mesh to all the levels of detail. But if our amount of particles is correct, it should not be so difficult. But yeah, it's quite a work to do this for each of our trees. Unlike leaving a like or subscribing, which is free and very easy, and helps us enormously in the colossal work that we'll be finishing our game. But anyway, when we're finally satisfied, we can prepare to export our trees. Adding, after the names, the format LOD0, LOD1 and LOD2 to each model, we can export the tree trunks and the tree canopies at the same time, so that Unity automatically assembles our detail groups. I do this 2 times, once for the version with the roots and once with the one without them, but the foliage is the same on both versions. But in addition to this, I recommend that when exporting all the models, we do it with its origin point in the origin 0 of the world, or with the rotations in 0 and the scales in 1. And also by selecting the experimental apply transform, all of this especially if you plan at some point to upload your models to the Unity store. About that, I probably still need to make some adjustments, minor adjustments to upload this package, as usual, such as fixing the UV in the trunks, and after these changes I also want to improve a little our pine trees, but still all of these are good habits in my experience. And well, with this we now have cool trees, a fact that makes a lot of difference in the presentation of the scene. We really like the final result, and even with some adjustments missing, with all the polygons in place and the vertex movement working properly, adjusting UVs and textures in comparison is something a lot easier. We also have all our vertical shortcuts in our scene working as expected. And finally, I will give a brief explanation of our line of sight for target detection in the still system, because the video has already been long enough, and in any case we still need to integrate it with all the missing pieces, so a proper presentation will have to wait for the next devlog. But in a very brief way, it works as follows. In start, we create a list of things to look for in the scene based on tags. We want to be able to use this logic not only with aggressive enemies, but for various behaviors. And at the moment any of these objects enters our range of vision, we calculate with a raycast if there is any obstacle blocking the object, and if it is in our cone of vision, which is quite reduced if we had not been altered yet. If what we are looking enters our cone of vision in the open, then our cone of vision extends to 360 degrees, and we can trigger the desired reaction. Right now it only works with chasing and combat, but we should be able to use it to flee from the sighted object as well. In pursuit, while we are in range of sight, we continue to update our destination based on the objectives we are seeing, but if our objective were to go out of our range of vision at any time, then we only run towards the last known position. Once we get there, we wait for a moment inspecting the area, and if we do not find anything, we return to our original position or to our patrol route if we have any. The logic is somewhat expensive and overcomplicated, but it allows us to choose between several objectives, the closest to us, tags to decide what to look for, mask of layers to add new obstacles to hide behind, to not only limit ourselves to chasing the player, but also neutral characters such as NPCs or forest animals, or even for enemies to chase and attack other different enemies. But all of this will be a task for the next week. For our part, this will be all for the moment. I thank you very much for staying with us until the end of the video. Your support motivates us beyond anything you could believe. I am Mark from Tryhard Studio. See you again next week. But for now, just to wish you as always a lot of success in your projects, and see you soon.